to another episode of Synamon Said. We have as our guest this evening Reverend Ralph David Abernathy III. I'm so pleased that he's here, and I invited him for my second show because he loves me, and I know he won't give me a hard time, so we'll just see about that. He could surprise me. Actually, I wanted to talk about some other issues, but today the hot issue is the New York Times Post cartoon. So we'll be talking about that. Before I get to that point, though, let me just make a few announcements. As I mentioned at our last show, at the beginning of the show, I'll try to share information regarding Clayton County and other things in the Atlanta metro area. On this coming Wednesday will be the last day for the Clayton County Library System 50% off book sales. So be sure to get over to the headquarters at 875 Battle Creek Road and check out the books that they have for this year's half-price book sale. In addition to that, on next Thursday, February the 27th, we have a job fair, South Brooklyn Job Fair, which will take place at the Georgia International Convention Center in College Park. And then there's the broadcastfromhome.com. I'm talking about broadcastfromhome.com because that's what this show really is all about when it gets to it, that economic development is one of the most important things that we need to focus on in our lives. And when you enjoy doing something, you're definitely going to make money doing it. So as you watch the show tonight, pay attention to the banners. And if you have any questions about how to broadcast at home and make money doing it, email cinemasays@aol.com. On March the 28th, please mark your calendars. March the 28th, Clayton County-wide Homeowners Association, in partnership with the Clayton County Foreclosure Resource Center, will be co-sponsoring a workshop to cover foreclosure prevention, property tax assessment, as well as the issue of mortgage fraud. So mark your calendar, March 28th, 10 to 4, National Archives, and we'll be giving you some more information as we get closer to the date. Tomorrow, the 21st, open mic at Silver's Delight Restaurant. Zarina Muhammad of Andy Lee Productions is featuring Fierce Soul. So be sure to get over to Silver's Delight tomorrow evening between 7 and 10. And the address there is 2879 East Point in East Point, Georgia. I especially encourage our residents here in Clayton to go to that particular event so you can get some ideas as to the kinds of things that we could do here in Clayton to enrich the culture. Finally, there's an event, well, it's not an event, there's a program that one of our members has called Free Oneness in Marriage. And these are workshop series that begin February the 27th at 7 p.m. at Southside Church in Reps. Call 770-471-2496 for more information. Ask for Wayne or Tanya Clark about that. How did I find out about this issue with the New York Post? Actually, I wasn't watching television. I got an email. That's why I want you all to recognize how important the internet is as a media for us getting information to each other. A lot of times what we see on TV, what we read in the newspaper, what we hear on the radio is not true, and even when it's corrected, it's still not true. So the internet is a source for us to get information to each other. I got an email from Carolyn Cook out of Riverdale, and she was expressing her outrage at the cartoon that was depicted in the New York Post on this past Wednesday. And she asked if I would talk to our online community as well as email all the folks in my account information and telling them how to send letters to the New York Post protesting that cartoon. That in itself wasn't enough for me. I felt that it was important for us to have dialogue this evening, and who better to do that with than Ralph David Abernathy? I mean, how good does it get? So having said all of that, I'm going to turn over to you, Ralph, and ask you, of course, I know you're aware of the situation that happened with the New York Post and the cartoon that was depicted about the chimpanzee and the officers and all of that. Tell us exactly what your thought was when you heard about it or saw it, or did you? Where were you? What happened?
Well, I personally, when it was first brought to my attention, I saw it on the news, and I received several phone calls from across the country concerning the issue. I can say to you that I considered it as a black man in America. I was personally offended by it, and it wasn't as, but I sought to, because I pray for the power to understand the misunderstood, to know the unknown, to hear the unheard, and to see the unseen. And so I sought to try and attempt to understand why it took place. And as I delved into that process, I could see how that cartoon could be displayed in that particular paper. What I was outraged about was the paper's response, particularly their attack on Al Sharpton for his making the issue prevalent in the community and in this nation. I was appalled by their response. And so, aside from being offended, I am appalled that today in 2009, when we have a black president of the United States of America, we still are not free, and not free as a country from bigotry and from hatred, from racism, and from those individuals that seek to separate that which this whole Constitution and this whole nation is supposed to be about, in creating a more perfect union.
You know, I caught your mom on Larry King Live back during the inauguration. I missed you because I was on the road trying to get there. But one thing that struck me that Juanita Jones Abernathy, your mom, stated, she made a statement that we have not arrived. She made me feel so good when she said that, because a lot of people actually have turned the page and have the feeling that now that we have a black president, that all is well. Can you speak to that?
Well, I can say to you that I personally have a unique perspective on that. I believe that we have come a long way as a people. Freedom is not simply the right to do as you please. Freedom is when it pleases you to do what is right. Therefore, freedom must be more than just physical. It's spiritual. It's psychological. It's mental. It's psychosocial. And so in that regard, we are still not free. And in my mother's words, we have yet to arrive.
Right.
In saying that, I can say to you that the election of our president, the first African American in this nation to be elected as president, I believe ends a 400-year relay that dates back to 1619, when those African American slaves that were brought over from the slave ship, that were tossed overboard by the mean, cruel slave masters. To those who touched these shores that we now call America, that journey of the African American people, we've been sacrificing, we've been stumbling, we've been fumbling, we've been fighting, we've been bleeding, we've been dying for the right to equally participate in the country in which we built. And so I would say to you that the civil rights movement is the last leg in that 400-year relay. And now we have freedom physically, but we still are enchained by a system and by a psychosocial impact, by a mental impact. And so there's still yet a lot of work to be done. And it's not over. And so in that regard, I would say to you that we've just begun. And the election of Barack Obama, if you must thank my father and Martin Luther King and my mother and and all those that paid the price and sacrificed. My mother's home was bombed. My father's church was dynamited. I was arrested at the age of 7, marching for the day that we would have a black elected as president. But if you thank all of those persons in the civil rights movement, you got to go back. You got to thank Harriet Tubman. You have to thank Sojourner Truth. You have to thank Fannie Lou Hamer. You have to thank Booker T. Washington, because this has been a holistic journey. And so I see a lot of pictures of people that liken Martin Luther King Jr. to Barack Obama. But I would like for us to look at this as a whole journey of African American people and the struggle that we have come through, and all the way back to Nat Turner. And so let's not just stop at Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
And let's not just stop at the civil rights movement.
Right.
But let's look at the power of our people
Right.
that have brought us over. And I want to say this one last thing about that.
Well, it's not that. Oh, I'm sorry.
and that is that when God had brought Martin and my father together to implement the civil rights movement, he was birthing Barack Obama. And so throughout the whole civil rights movement, Barack Obama was being birthed. And everybody wanted to know, well, where did he come from? He just showed up. You know, we never seen him. We didn't see him in the mainstream of politics. We didn't see him in the mainstream of civil rights. I mean, he just popped up. Well, he came from God. And so if we want to thank somebody,
we can thank God.
Let's thank God.
Let's thank God.
Because while God was birthing Barack during the civil rights movement, guess what? He's birthing somebody right now.
Yes.
Because my whole point is that Barack is the president for the United States of America.
Yes.
But our people have still been disenfranchised. The majority of black people in America are still uneducated.
Right.
The majority of black people in America are still poor. And so we can't expect that Barack Obama will be able to solve those problems. He's a policymaker. He's a politician. And by its own nature, politics is the science of compromise. And so he has to be in a position where he can be president and be the best president that he can be, which means that he has to give and he has to take. It's a policy of compromise. What we need is God is birthing right now a leader to come up in the midst of the people that will lead us into the next step, the post-civil rights era. Civil rights is over. We can go where we want to go. We can eat where we want to eat. We can live in any kind of community we want to live in. We can drive any kind of car we want to drive. You can marry any kind of woman you want to, and you can look at a white woman and not have to worry about being murdered or castrated or hung in the town square. And so we have those basic civil rights. What we don't have is equal access and equal opportunity to education. What we don't have is economic empowerment. And a people who've been disenfranchised for 440 years, we are now in the adolescent stages of our generational development. Just the other day, we got the right to vote. And we've come just that far in such a short period of time. But I say that to say that we have so much further to go. We have a long way to go. And the journey that started all the way back in 1619 must continue. And I'm saying that to say to you that we as a people have to now, I believe, we have to look within our communities. And now that we are, those who have must help those who have not. We must go back into our communities and implement programs to help teach people, our people, poor people, all people, how to become successful citizens. The prison system in America is 75 to 80% black, African American, young males between the ages of 18 and 27 to 29. Right? I know because I went to prison for $5,700 on a state Senate expense account.
You know what?
And they gave me 10 years with 4 to serve for $5,700, and I thank God for that experience.
You know what? There was something you said about that experience when you came out, and it sticks with me, and I'll remind you of that. You told me that it was so ironic that being there, the young men were referring to you as Pop.
Right.
And at the time, you were how old at the time?
Right, I was in my early 40s.
Okay, and these are...
Yes, right, and I was going to tell you that. But they, prison, it's a lot of these sisters that are walking around here with these babies. I promise you, if you ask them where their babies' daddies are, a lot of them will tell you they're in prison. Prison is full of young, intelligent, aggressive, smart, young black men, many of them for nonviolent offenses that don't need to be in prison, but need to be in rehab situations. I experienced it, and I'm not bitter because I'm better. I wouldn't have known if I hadn't gone.
That's another thing you said.
And I thank God for that experience. I really do. And so I embrace it. I'm not ashamed of it. But I know now more than most people know because I stayed in the Senate for 10 years and had never walked into a state prison. I didn't even know what a halfway house was. And they embraced me. I saw a lot. I heard a lot. I understood a lot that I had misunderstood. And so as a result of that, I got a vision. And I know that we have to help those brothers when they get ready to come out, to help them to reacclimate themselves back into society in such a way that they won't go back to prison. We have to educate our young people. We have to open up what I call centers of excellence, where we can create tutoring centers for young people, elementary, middle school, and high school students, where when they leave school at 3 o'clock, they can come to a center of excellence, where they get help on their homework, they get tutored in math and reading, and they get a hot meal and a little mentoring and be home by 7:30. Those are the types of things that we have to do to supplement the system to help save our people. Because if we don't address these issues now that we are free, 50 years from now, it'll be racism masquerading itself as classism.
Yes, absolutely. I want to go back to something you said about education, and you were mentioning different people throughout our history, going all the way back to Sojourner Truth. Let me just read a quote from our new Attorney General, Eric Holder, and what he says in reference to that. He says, Black history is given a separate and unequal treatment by our society in general and by our educational institutions in particular. As a former American history major, I am struck by the fact that such a major part of our national story has been divorced from the whole. For too long, we have been willing to segregate the study of Black history, but we have to recognize that until Black history is included in the standard curriculum in all of our schools and becomes a regular part of all of our lives, it will be viewed as a novelty, relatively unimportant, and not as weighty as true American history. And that's what you're saying, man.
Oh, absolutely. To go and to understand exactly what the Attorney General is saying in a very profound way is that Black history, if you will, or African American history, is woven into the fabric of American history. This country would not be what it is today if it were not for the contributions of African Americans. So why must it be a separate week?
Right.
Or a separate month, or a separate day? Why must we spend special time? Special time should be every day. Every day that children go to school, they ought to be studying about Black history along with white history. They ought to be all studying history together. And it ought to be all about the story of the fabric that was woven to make this country what it is today.
Absolutely.
Now, going back to the issue that happened in the New York Post. The New York Post, from what I understand of my research, has had historical problems with racist cartoons and racist articles and racist statements. I'm not from New York, but I have spoken with some people who are, and New York has had the New York Post has had a long history. And I think we have come to a point in our society where we ought not be able to accept that. We ought to put our foot down. And the New York Post needs to close its doors.
Oh, okay.
They need to go out of business.
They need to go out of business. I
Yes.
like that.
They need to close their doors and they need to go out of business. Because from what I understand, they have historically, this is not the first time, this is not the second time, this is not the third time, but this is a habitual behavior that has come out of the Post, and that's why their response to Al Sharpton's attack on them was so brutal. Are you aware of what they said?
Yeah, and talk to the online community. Share it with us.
Well, they basically said that he was a publicity-seeking, opportunistic individual that was vintage Al Sharpton, and it's nothing more than, in essence, and nothing more than a bag of wind. And it was not founded on any significant evidence, and that he just was just publicity seeking. It was just a publicity stunt. And that was in essence what their response to Al Sharpton's attack on the New York Post, which I was appalled at. I didn't understand where that came from. For white people to be telling black people that, or for a white man to be telling a black man that however you feel, you only feel that way because you just try to get attention, and you're just trying to use that as a publicity stunt. To see a monkey shot by police in New York. Now, let's look at the history of that.
Yes, let's do that.
New York has a history of police shooting black males. They have a history of that. The police department in New York has a history of shooting black males. Now, we all know that back in the 1800s and in the early 1900s, white people looked at black people and compared us to the animal, a monkey.
To justify their treatment.
Well, they never considered us until 1865, when the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was passed, where we considered human beings. Up until that time, all through slavery, we were never considered human beings. We were considered property, 2/3 or 1/3 human. And so the monkey was considered the animal that was compared to the black man. Now that is historical. It dates back to early days of slavery. And then to see two police officers shooting a monkey. Now everybody knows that President Barack Obama had implemented the stimulus bill.
Right.
The stimulus bill didn't come under George Bush. As a matter of fact, George Bush wasn't talking about stimulus when he left the White House. So for the cartoonists to say first that you have, for him to draw a picture of two police officers, New York police officers, shooting a monkey and saying, I guess they're going to have to find somebody else to come up with the stimulus bill. How can we not think that that was about President Barack Obama?
Yeah.
Because he's the only person that ever came up with a stimulus bill. Prior to him, there wasn't a stimulus bill. So if you shoot a monkey and you say, well, I guess they're going to have to find somebody else to come up with a stimulus bill. Well, monkeys don't do stimulus bills.
No, they do not.
So what were they meaning when they shot the monkey? Other than to compare the monkey to a black man, which they have historically done since the early 1800s. And then the New York police shoot the black man who is compared as a monkey and say that, well, they'll have to come up with somebody else to create the stimulus bill. It's very clear to me, and anybody that I think would look at that with fair judgment, that it was very offensive and it was directed toward black people and directed toward our new black president. So I'm personally offended.
Well,
And appalled.
And appalled. Offended, appalled. I mean, it's just despicable that, as you said, in this day and age, we have our first African American president, and still we're battling those types of stereotypes and that type of treatment from the media. I remember.
And they can get away with it.
And they can get away with it.
Right. I mean, they have the audacity to not apologize, to not try to seek some level of understanding, but to come back and call people publicity seekers and things of that nature. It's just absolutely absurd.
Well, Ralph, I want to say thank you so very much for every moment that you spent here with us, and you know I'm going to call you to come back again.
I'll be happy to.
I'd love for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to you all out there in the online community, I'd like to say thank you for joining us this evening. And look for Synamon Says on next Friday. Our guest will be Dr. Henry Anderson, Clayton County White Homeowners Association founding member, as well as Mr. Michael King, who is one of the school board members of Clayton County Public Schools. So please be sure to join us next week. And again, we thank you for being here. Ralph, I can't thank you enough for coming.
Well, thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Hello to Micah, Christiana,
Ralph
and Ralph gave you the floor.
Yeah,
And of
I
course,
love
my
you
love
all.
to Annette.
Thank you.
All right. So I think we just spoke talk like selfless. It's okay because I mess up every time, but I just try to do it. Keep watching. You okay? Okay. I told Ray